much for being here. We know you're all busy and there's a lot going on, so we appreciate you taking a weeknight and coming to hear what we have to say about college counseling for your students. My name is Erica Shen. I'm the Director of College Counseling here at Linfield. This is my colleague, Michelle Zavoli. Last year, many of you probably worked with Mrs. Susie Valencia, who's our underclassmen counselor. She works with our 9th and 10th graders. And Michelle and I, now that your students are upperclassmen, they are divided amongst us two. So at the end of the presentation, we'll let you know how we go about dividing students and who your students' counselors are. But we will be your primary contacts at the counseling office, and we will be the ones to walk your students through the college research and application process. So let's take a look at this first slide here. Hello. Okay. So I would like to start with our general philosophy on college admissions here at Linfield. And you'll hear different philosophies at different schools that you talk to. We're here our philosophy is to help our students get into the school that best fit them academically and socially, spiritually. We truly believe that every single one of you here will have a child that has his or her unique college list. Nobody here, no two students have the exact same college list. And we hope that you will embark on this journey with the same philosophy. I have been a college counselor for about 12 years, and I have met many parents. There are parents who come into my office and say, let's pull up the 20 top schools in the U.S., and those are the schools that my students are applying to. I have parents who come in and say, let's pull up a list of the cheapest 20 schools, and those are the schools that my students are applying to. We have parents who come in and say it's important that our children continue to have a Christian education when they are in college. We have parents who say, no, I think it's time for our child to transition to a larger public university. So every family and every child has a special, different need, unique need, which is what makes our job so fun and unique and exciting. So we hope that you support this philosophy and understand that when we recommend colleges to your students, and that you will have an open mind and say, oh, I don't understand, I've never heard of this college before, but I will look at it and try to figure out why my child's counselor recommended this school. Maybe I've had students who found some hidden gems and are very happy at their schools now because they were willing to take the risk and get into the process with an open mind. Okay, so here are the things we're going to be talking about tonight. We are going to quickly review the graduation requirements so that hopefully all of your students are on track. And we're going to talk a little bit about eligibility versus selection, what that means in college admissions lingo. We're going to talk about UC admissions, since most of the students in California do apply to the UCs. We're going to talk a little bit about the Cal State admission process. We're going to talk about the private schools, which includes Christian schools. And then we'll transition to standardized testing. We'll talk a little bit about how your students can get ready, what are the different types of tests. We'll talk about students who are athletes, artists, in the performing arts, and then we will open it up to Q&A at the end. Any questions so far? This is such a great turnout. We're so excited. We're so excited you're here. So I'll turn this over to Michelle, who is going to talk a little bit about the graduation requirements.
All right, thanks guys so much for coming. We're so glad you're here. We're going to go over just tonight kind of a basic overview for junior year. This is a big year for your students. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and I can answer any questions that you might have. These are the basic graduation requirements. Most of you are probably aware of them. And your students, when they complete these courses, not only are they going to graduate with a college prep diploma from Linfield, but it also makes them eligible for the Cal States, the UCs, the private schools like Cal Baptist. So all students take 4 years of Bible, 4 years of English, 2 years of science, 3 years of history. They're going to do a year of fine art, which is band or theater. Math, they're going to do 3 years, 2 years of PE, 2 years of foreign language, a semester of health, a year of speech and debate, and 3 years of electives. Okay?
Don't forget that 1 out of the 2 years of PE, they typically do off campus, so it's not a PE course, so they either do 2 seasons of sports or they do 136 hours of PE outside. Just so you know, they won't have 2 years of PE on campus. The second year is typically satisfied by a sport, 2 sports, or outside PE hours.
Yes, and the outside PE hours, they can't just, go outside and run. It has to be they're at a gym or they're taking, lessons with somebody. It has to be something that we can approve. And then eligibility versus selection. So we just want to make sure that you understand that just because your students are eligible, when they graduate Linfield, they're eligible for Cal States and the UCs, doesn't mean that they're going to be selected to attend those schools. We work really, really hard with your students to make sure they have as many yeses as possible, but eligibility means they're meeting the basic requirements for freshman admission into that university or college. And selection is the universities, they can't admit all applicants, right? So even though your student meets those requirements, it doesn't guarantee a green light in. We work really hard to try to get them in, but it doesn't always 100% mean they're going to get in. And then this is the comprehensive review. So all colleges, they kind of evaluate your students differently. The UCs use what we call a comprehensive review. So the UCs are going to be your schools like UCSD, UCLA, and they use 14 factors, main factors, when they consider your students for admittance into their college. Grade point average is the biggest one, right? So because they're highly competitive, if your student's looking at a UC, they need to have a pretty high GPA. The test scores are also important. That is going to be your SAT or your ACT. And then performance in the number of courses beyond the minimum A through G. An example of that is here at Linfield, they only do 2 years of foreign language, so 2 years of Spanish. But UCs like to see your students go on for a 3rd or 4th year foreign language. So we try really hard to try to persuade them to continue on in a foreign language or a math or a science, because it's demonstrating that your student's going above and beyond the basic requirements, and that makes them look better as an applicant. And then UC approved honors courses and advanced courses. Those are going to be our honors courses like our STEAM classes and advanced courses such as our AP courses. And then also the quality of their senior year. So a lot of our students go, whew, I made it to senior year, I can take 4 study halls, I don't even have to come to school half the time, and we're like, no, you have to take courses. So they don't get a free pass senior year. They still need to be showing that they're taking classes and moving forward. We say they can have a study hall or an intern, right, but they still need to be demonstrating that they're taking courses that are gonna make them look eligible for a UC, or more eligible. And then academic opportunities as well. And then also, I know there's a lot here, also outstanding performance in one or more academic subject areas. So maybe your student's really good in math or English. We want to make sure that if that's their strong subject, that they're scoring those high grades in that class. And then just improving their academic performance. Maybe your student didn't do so well freshman year, maybe sophomore year it didn't go so well. The colleges like to see them improve. So junior year is a great time for them to kind of improve their grades. By this time, they're kind of learning time management and learning how to study and how to manage their extracurriculars. So improving over time. And then also academic accomplishments in light of life experience. So things they're doing outside of school are equally important. They're not just their GPA. So extracurriculars, clubs they're involved in, maybe they did a mission trip, things like that are really important as well. Do you guys have any questions regarding what the UCs are looking for, those factors? No? Okay, so we're going to move on to the Cal State admissions. This is going to be Cal State San Marcos, San Diego State University. Those are schools that are part of the Cal State system. And eligibility versus selection holds true for the Cal State schools as well, just like the UCs. So your students, when they graduate with their college prep diploma from Linfield, they're going to meet the requirements to go into a Cal State, but it doesn't guarantee admission. And then the Cal States do something that's a little bit unique. They use what's called the eligibility index. And you guys can actually go onto this website. It's in your handouts that we gave you. So you can go on there and put in the information for your student, and it will tell you a number. It gives you an index. And the schools will actually, you can kind of see where your students falling based on test scores, GPA. And so it's a good way to see if maybe a Cal State is a reach or maybe one of the other Cal States is within their range, because they're all a little bit different. So here you're gonna see, this was for 2017. And so we have the non-impacted schools, that's gonna be Bakersfield, Channel Islands. Those schools on the far left, that means that it's not impacted, which means they're a little bit easier to get into. They're still competitive, but they're a little bit easier to get into. Their eligibility index is a little bit lower than the other schools. And then the impacted universities, they require a little bit higher than the minimum eligibility index to have a good chance of being accepted. Just because they're a little bit more popular, they don't have as many spots available to accept applicants. And that's a little bit longer of a list. So those are gonna be your Cal States, and on the far right is the eligibility index. When we meet with your students, we always calculate where they're at, and we let them know, okay, these are gonna be maybe more of a reach, this is within your range. And some of them will say, hey, we need you to take that SAT or ACT again, because if you take it and you get a 1200, now you're bumped up into that range. Do you guys have any questions regarding that? No? And we'll walk you through this when we meet with your students too. Okay, private and out of state. So we encourage our students to apply to colleges broadly. So there's a diverse list of schools on their list. So all of our students that we work with, their lists are very, very different. I don't know if we have any students that have the exact same list. And that's what makes our job so fun, is we get to meet with your students and get to know them and be able to help them with fitting a school that's gonna fit who they are, right? We're not gonna do good at our jobs if we just get your kids to college. Anybody can do that, but we wanna make sure that your kids are not only going to college, but they're loving where they're going, they're thriving, and they're gonna graduate in those 4 years. So we focus really big on fit, and we do encourage them to go out of state. This year we had a good amount of students this last year that decided to go out of state, and I think that's a wonderful opportunity for them, so we encourage them, if that's something they're interested in, to pursue it. There are the private schools, which is independent, which is gonna be like a USC. And then we have the private schools that are gonna be like your Baylor or Liberty or CBU. And then the WUI is a program that we'll talk about a little bit later on in this slide. And that is part of the Western Undergraduate Exchange. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. But that one is for out-of-state schools on the West Coast. And we encourage students to make a list of all the schools' specific requirements, because out-of-state schools are just a little bit different than the California schools. So we'll walk them through that if they want to do that. I decided to go out of state for my college experience. I went to Liberty for my undergrad, and I was from Temecula, and it was the most amazing experience. So I always tell my students, if you want to go out of state and you want to travel, go do it, and you can always come back to Temecula. So it was a great experience for me, and we had a student last year go to Liberty, and they're really enjoying their time. So we always say, go out of state. It doesn't have to be a Christian school if that's not what you're looking for, but there are some really great schools that are out of California as well. Okay, this is what I was talking about, the WUI. So this is just an example. Basically, the WUI, it's pronounced WUI at the bottom. And this is basically an opportunity for out-of-state schools on the West Coast, such as Arizona, to be able to get California students to their school. So as an incentive, they basically say, you're not gonna have to pay out-of-state tuition. So you basically pay half of, you wouldn't pay just California or Arizona, it's like half. So they meet you kind of in the middle, which is really nice. So Arizona State, if you're an Arizona resident as of last year, was $9,834 a year. As a non-resident, you're gonna get hit with a hefty out-of-state bill because it's a public school, not private, and that one's $27,000. So it's a big jump. But if you're in California and you do the WUI program, the Western Undergraduate Exchange, it comes in at $14,000. So a little bit higher than what it would be if you're an Arizona resident, but not drastically higher as if you were a non-resident. So you do save about $12,000 a year. So if you do have a student who is interested in going out of state, we will recommend, hey, let's look at those WUI schools. It does save some money, and it does give them the opportunity to go out of state.
What states does that cover?
We have a whole list, so it's like there's Utah, Arizona, Washington, New Mexico, and we have a whole list of schools. So a lot of the schools, not Texas, unfortunately. I know. Not Texas, but we do have a big list. So if you guys are ever curious, we can always give you a copy. But it's a really neat program. Now, if you're going to say like Baylor, right, or Liberty, they don't have an out-of-state tuition. So there's tuition's the same because it's a private, and so only for public schools does this apply.
Here's something tricky about the WUI to keep in mind. At some schools, so at Arizona State, for example, if you are a student from any of the western states, you get that WUI student discount. However, sometimes they limit that discount to certain majors. Really popular majors such as engineering and nursing typically are the two that are not covered under the WUI agreement. So we will do that research for you and we'll have that conversation. But if you're just bored at night wanting to look at colleges, just make sure you read that fine print because it'll say this is not a part of the WUI exchange program. So just something to watch out for.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Does that apply at all of the schools that are participating, or does it vary from school?
It varies from school to school. So some school like Northern Arizona, for example, the WUI goes for all majors except for engineering. But at a school like Utah State, it goes for all majors, no matter what major your student chooses. So it just depends. It varies from school.
Good questions. Okay, Erica, you're going to talk about
fun.
standardized testing.
I always get to talk about standardized testing. Okay, so standardized testing. Your students are not going to want to talk about this ever. Nobody does, okay? Which is why I get to do this fun part. Colleges require, no matter what school, I'll talk about the test optional schools in just a second, but in generally speaking, 98% of the schools in the United States will require your student to take either the SAT or the ACT. Okay, there is a myth out there going on that says, oh, the UCs prefer the SAT or the elite colleges prefer the ACT. That's not true. So they can take either the SAT or the ACT. I'll go over their pretty subtle differences now in the next couple of slides. But just so you know that that's something that your student has to do. Even if your students are thinking, well, I don't know if I want to go to a four-year school, maybe I want to join the military, maybe I want to go to a community college and transfer, maybe I'm thinking about trade school. Even if that's the case, we always encourage students to take the SAT or the ACT at least one time. So that if they change their mind, and we know teenagers change their minds all the time, it won't be too late, right? We won't say, oh, sorry, you didn't take the SAT or ACT, it's too late, you're not eligible to apply to any four-year universities. So we encourage them every junior, we say, go and take an SAT or ACT in your junior year. And make sure that you take them with writing. So when you're registering for the exams, it'll ask you, do you want to take the optional writing portion? Some schools, very few schools, so the Cal States, for example, will not require the writing section. But most schools will require the writing section. So I would hate for your student to study for the test, invest 4 hours on a Saturday morning, take the test without writing, score perfectly, and for that score to not count because they didn't take it with the writing. So make sure that when you register for the test, where it says optional writing, it's not optional. You have to pay the extra $8 for them to do the writing portion. Okay? Some schools also require the SAT subject test. Anybody familiar with what these are? Okay. So SAT subject tests have nothing to do with the regular SAT or the ACT. They are 1 hour long, single subject tests that test your student's knowledge in a specific subject. So you can take the SAT subject test in a variety of subjects. You can take it in math, biology, chemistry, Japanese. There are a list. And we typically tell students to take the subject test in the area that they're really strong in, right? So for example, if you want to go into engineering, it would be a good idea for you to take it in physics and in math, right, to demonstrate your strength. If you speak a foreign language, if you are awesome in Spanish, take the Spanish test. These tests are scored out of an 800, and the higher that score, the more it demonstrates the student's strength in that particular subject. Like I said, not all schools require the SAT subjects. Here are the types of schools that tend to require these tests. The highly competitives, so these are your Ivies and your sub-Ivies, so this is your Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, so your 8 Ivy League schools, and then this is your sub-Ivies like your Stanford, your Northwestern, your Duke, your Emory, so right, these schools that you hear about over and over again. Those schools typically require 2, sometimes 3 SAT subject tests. So if you know that your students are going to be applying to those schools, they need to start thinking about the subject tests. Sometimes at schools that are not so competitive, there are some disciplines that will require, so certain majors that will require the student to take specific subject tests. Engineering, I'll use that as an example. Most schools with engineering programs will require your student to submit an SAT subject test in Math Level 2. There's Math Level 1 or Math Level 2. Nobody takes Level 1, so don't even worry about that. So Math Level 2 is very common for engineering programs to require that of students. Architecture, students who are going to architecture tend to have to take Math Level 2 and a science, so a chemistry, a physics, or a biology. So that's something that when we sit down with your students and you, we will remind them, we'll trigger that as we talk about your list of schools, we will advise and say, oh, I think it would be safer for you to have a couple of SAT subject tests in your back pocket just in case you end up applying to a school that requires them. So you're probably wondering, well, what kind of subject test should they take? I mean, there's a list of 25 different tests, so which one should they take? If your student is in an AP class this year, so if your student is in AP US History, if your student is in AP Chem, God bless them, if they're in AP Chem, or AP Physics, or AP Bio, by the end of this year, the school year, so by next May, they will be required to take the AP exam. When they prepare for the AP exam, they essentially review everything that they have done throughout the school year. Right after they take that AP exam would be an excellent time for them to take a subject test in whichever areas they took their AP exams in. Does that make sense? So that way they're not doing double the studying when they study for the AP exam. They're in turn studying for the content for the SAT subject test. The format of the tests are very different, but the content is very similar. So it's a good way for them to wait. So don't rush in, sign them up for SAT subject tests right now, but come spring, it would be a good time to see, oh, you're doing really well in AP Chem, let's sign you up for the chemistry subject test. So far, so good? Okay, this is a bright group of parents. Usually when I talk about the SAT subject test is when I lose them. So regardless of what tests your students have to take, the SAT, the ACT, the SAT subject test, your students must prep. This is not the kind of test that they could walk in without any prep. It does not work that way. The classes they have taken in high school so far prepares them for the content of the test, absolutely. But the classes do not prepare them for the testing strategies. So in high school, especially in a private high school, we focus a lot on individualized attention. We focus a lot on project-based learning discussions. We don't test your students all day long. We don't get funding from standardized testing, right? So sometimes our students don't have a lot of experience taking 1.5-hour tests. That's why they have to prep. So how do they go about doing that? I always say prepping for standardized testing is like your personal fitness routine, okay? There are some people like my husband who gets up every morning at 5 o'clock, goes out for a run. Every single morning, rain or shine. I'm not like that. I don't have that kind of discipline, right? I barely wake up on time, right? I have to get my kids to school. So if your child is like my husband, who is highly disciplined, very driven, goal-oriented, they can study on their own, not a problem. Get them a book. We have a Naviance test prep program that we've told your students about. They can study on their own, absolutely, not a problem. Okay, and they probably will do really well. Most students are not like that. Most students need a little bit of a nudge, right? Then you go to the second type of students who maybe like my friend, joins a gym, takes the Pilates classes at the gym, and does kickboxing, and does well in a group situation, right? She feels motivated because there are other people with the same goal. So those students do really, really well in a test prep course with small groups. So a test prep, so like Kaplan, Princeton Review, those are just some known test prep places in the area. So that could be a good fit for them. They're in there with maybe 6 or 7 other students, and they're motivated, there's the social aspect, and that gets them going on test. Or your student could be like me, completely unmotivated, right? So I need a personal trainer to show up at my door for me to work out and exercise, and I don't have that discipline. Well, in that case, then your student is looking at a private tutor. Somebody will knock on your door every Tuesday, Thursday at 4:30 and say, Johnny, it's time for you to study for your SAT. It just, the level of support your student needs is just going to be different. It varies. So I think as parents, this is a very good time to have a candid conversation with your student. You know, probably by this point, you already know the kind of student you have, and you have a pretty good idea of what they need. So this is a good time to have a candid conversation with them and said, I went and listened to this presentation from your college counselor. We want you to start prepping for the SAT or ACT. This is what we think is best for you. What do you think, right? So make them commit. Set doable goals for them, right? Don't say, oh yeah, the SAT is happening in 2 weeks, let's sign you up for a course. Set them up for success and build their confidence in standardized testing. Then it won't be so bad. So we have recommendations for one-on-one tutoring and small group classes. We're not affiliated with any of them, but we've heard some names throughout the years. So if you wanted recommendations, we can talk to you. You can reach out to us after the presentation. Go ahead.
How early should they start prepping for the test?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how early should they do it? I always say it depends on where your students are at with their math level. If your student is still finishing up Algebra 2, then you want to wait till the end of junior year because the tests cover material through Algebra 2. So you want to wait till the end of, or as close to the end of junior year as possible so they've got most of that knowledge. So if your student are currently enrolled in Algebra 2, you want to wait till second semester of junior year, probably March or April of junior year. If your student have completed Algebra 2 and is in pre-calc or calc right now, or whatever calc, A, B, C, D, E, F, G they're in right now, they can start as soon as right now. In your packet, we have listed the standardized testing dates that are coming up. So I know some of your students are in football or in basketball, volleyball, so they're involved in a bunch of things. You can take a look at that schedule and see what works best for their extracurricular activities. So remember I said that colleges don't care if your students take the SAT or the ACT? Well, which one should they take, right? The best way to determine which one they should take is by taking a practice test of the SAT and an unofficial practice test of the ACT. We have, did everybody get the green flyer? We're offering here, the green flyer. We're offering a mock SAT, ACT. So this mock test is essentially half of an SAT, half of an ACT. They can come and take that, and it'll sort of help them figure out, well, did I score really high on the SAT portion or the ACT portion? What are the differences between the two tests? Did you guys remember the SAT redesign last spring? If you have an older student, you probably remember this. Prior to the redesign, the SAT and ACT were drastically different tests. However, so back then, it was really crucial for students to figure out which one was a better fit. The SAT was seeing that it was losing a fair amount of market share, so the SAT had a redesign last spring. As a result, the SAT and ACT are pretty similar in content as well as the way they ask questions now. So the differences are very subtle. Most students will do fine. If they're good students, most students will do fine on either test. The biggest difference between the SAT and the ACT is that the ACT is much faster paced. Okay, so in the allotted amount of time, the SAT requires students to answer less questions. The ACT is much faster paced. I think they only have like 46 seconds or something for each question. So if you know your student is a nervous test taker who typically runs out of time on their tests, the SAT may be a slightly better fit. But I truly believe that the best way to figure out which one is the better test for them is for them to take a mock. Just come in, do a mock. If this mock test, we'll offer another mock in the spring. So if this one doesn't work for you, you can wait till the one in the spring, or you can have your student go on the SAT website or the ACT website. They're listed on your handouts where we listed the test dates. There are free questions there. So have them sit down and do a few questions, and they will be able to tell you, yeah, I don't even understand what this test is asking. I prefer this one, or vice versa. So come do the mock if you can. If not, have them go on the website, take some practice questions, and that should sort of help them figure out.
It's the same thing you offered last year, right?
Yes, it's the same thing. So if your student have taken it, then she doesn't need to do it again. Yeah. Most likely your student will want to take what their friends are taking, but go ahead.
Is it the exact same test?
No, it's not. So the questions are different, but it's the same format. It's the same, half of an SAT, half of an ACT.
It's really good. If you have a student that hasn't done it, I would encourage you guys to do it, because I'm going to be the one proctoring that test. So every year when I proctor it, we treat it just like it's the real thing. So they come in, they're timed, they have to be silent, and so they get practice for what the real test is going to be like, and that kind of helps if you have a student who gets nervous really easily or test anxiety. I think it's really helpful for them to kind of know the procedures and how the test runs. Yeah.
Do you recommend retaking it? I texted him, I'm like, I think you should retake it as a warm-up, because she's taking the ACT the following weekend.
Oh,
Do you
awesome.
think it's a good warm-up or not really
No,
necessary?
no. If
She
she's already
knows that's what she
taking,
wants to
yeah,
do.
no.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No, so this is good for students who are at the beginning stages of standardized testing. If your student has already invested the summer on an SAT prep course, and that's the test your student is taking, then there's no reason to go back. And so this is, the mock is good for your students who are at the beginning stages of figuring out which test they should take.
And if you guys are interested in the mock, you just sign up in the counseling office or have your student, and it's $20 to take.
We'll take your money tonight if you want to do it tonight. Well, because sometimes you guys forget and then the due passes. And so we'll take a check or cash, whatever. We'll take it tonight if you want to sign your student up. Yeah.
On the actual SAT, in my day, you answered a question and then 3 more questions were dependent on you answering that first question correctly. Is that still how it is, or it's changed now?
No, because it's all paper-based, so it doesn't, you don't know, so the questions are predetermined.
Well,
I'm
Tom
impressed
took
you
the-
remember, wow.
Yeah, thank
Throw it
you.
in there.
Because that's all you had. It
Yeah.
was sketchy, it was scary. Okay, so Tom took the mock test before he finished Algebra 2, so he wasn't happy with his score.
Okay.
Would you recommend he retakes the mock test, or just starts prepping?
No, just start prepping. Yeah, Tom needs to just prep. Yeah, because you and I have had this conversation.
Well, but he also talked about how he felt like he wanted to take the SAT, the ACT, because the SAT, he thought, had those kind of questions where he answered here, and if he got it wrong. So that was the mock. That's why I'm kind of curious when you say it was redesigned.
The mock, they did the mock electronically?
No, that's not what she's saying. She's saying the answer you got for this question,
Uh-huh.
then you had to use that for the next couple questions.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, I thought you meant that the questions changed. Yes, so it's the same. Sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is still the same on the actual test. Same thing for the SAT, same thing for the ACT. So that's the
So
same.
the
for
ACT
both.
also has it where?
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, I missed
That's okay.
it. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. All right. How many of you in here have a student athlete? Somebody who plans on playing NCAA? Okay. Okay. What kind of sports do we have tonight?
Basketball,
Swimming.
Oh, swimming. Okay. All right. So your students have this unique pathway that is a little bit different than the traditional student. The traditional students typically just have a list of colleges that cover where they want to go to college. Your students will basically have 2 college lists. One is a list where they would like to go to college, right? With or without their sport, this is where they would like to go. If they get injured, if something happens, if they change their mind about their sports, here are the schools that they are excited about, this is where they would like to go. But they will have a second list that'll continue to evolve as the season evolves, right? So depending on which coach they talk to, depending on what offers they get. So right now I have a football player who is a senior. We just met this morning with his mom actually. So he has a list of school where he would go fit academically and socially, but he also has another list of school that is much more competitive because he's hoping that playing football will help him get into, Harvard, Cornell, Yale, those type of schools. But that list is going to evolve, right? The moment he gets an offer from Harvard, he's dropping everything else, right? That's where he's going. So your student, just know that your students will have sort of 2 parallel tracks that are going. So we will help you with the academic part, and we will help you with the athletic part. However, athletics is not our specialty. We don't barely know how football works. I hate to admit that, right? So I don't know your students' athletic ability. We do work with the coaches here very closely. So I'll call Coach Burns, for example, and say, okay, this kid is telling me that he could probably go to Cornell for football. Is that true? Sometimes coach will say, yeah, for sure. Most of the time he'll go, yeah, no, he needs a better option, a different option. So we work very closely with the coaches to help refine that list. Make sense? Okay. Any of the parents in here have students in the performing arts, dancers, singers? Okay. Okay. So if your student is thinking about going into college for a performing arts or a fine arts program, when it comes time for college applications, they will have a slightly more complicated application because their application will include portfolios. So if they want to go into design or architecture or any sort of 2D or 3D art, they will need to send in a portfolio of their artwork, which they have to prepare right on top of the regular application materials. If your student is going into the performing arts, chances are they will need to have an audition, and that needs to be scheduled and planned out, and they have to prepare for it. So just so you know, because they have these special added talents, their application process will take longer, therefore they need to start earlier than other people. Make sense? So they might say, oh, my friend Johnny is still hanging out, it's October of senior year, he's not doing anything. Well, then you need to remind them Johnny is not going to Juilliard. So just know that if they have those extra components, they will need to start earlier than everybody else. Okay? All right. So the mantra for junior year is for your students to, this is time, by the end of junior year, they should know their list of schools. How do they go from being completely clueless? I don't know. How many times do you guys hear that from your teenagers? What do you want to do? I don't know. Where do you want to go to college? I don't know. Right? So how do they go from I don't know to yes, I'm excited about these schools. I think they're a great fit for me. How do they go from this stage to that stage? So we're here to help them. And at Linfield, because we're a small school and we are a college prep school, we have a lot of resources for your students to get to know a college. I always tell students that putting together your college list is like buying your first car. None of them are going to go out to a car dealership and say, yeah, sure, I'll take that green minivan. That looks good. None of them will want that, right? They'll want the black truck that is raised, that has wheels that are this big, and they'll have their list of the things that they want. So I tell them they need to have that same list for colleges. Do you want a big school? Do you want a small school? Do you want to stay in state? Do you want to go out of state? So that you are an active, engaged shopper when it comes to the college shopping experience, right? You're not just gonna go to any college that accepts you. It's too much money for you all to pay, right? So we want them to be an engaged participant in this process. So we have college visits that we take students on. Sometimes they're day visits. We've gone to San Diego State, University of San Diego, UC San Diego. We have trips coming up to Cal Baptist, UC Riverside. We've got day trips coming up, but we also have overnight trips. Last year we took our students to Texas, and that was so much fun. It was a little bit of work for us, but it was a lot of fun.
So fun.
And it's really great, and we have an overnight LA trip going to USC, UCLA, Loyola Marymount coming up. So
Do you have another Texas trip coming up?
we don't this year because we went last year, so we try to offer a different. So we might bring that back this year.
We're gonna be doing Oregon in the spring.
In the spring, so we'll do Oregon. So we want to encourage you to send your students on these trips, right? It's a good, last year on our Texas trip, we had a student who said, well, I'm only coming on this trip because my mom signed me up. I will never leave California. I don't even like Texas. It's not near the ocean. Okay, fine. So he's on this trip. By the end of the trip, and the trip was only, 4 days long? He came back and he said, yeah, one of the schools we saw is now my top choice. And it's amazing for us as counselors, it's very rewarding to see them go through that transformation and make an informed decision for themselves. So we highly encourage you to get your students to participate. And if they don't, it would be good for you as a family if you have time to take them on the road and visit some colleges. We also have college fairs that are coming up here. Probably have you gotten a small postcards? It's on that table. You can pick one up on October 10th. We're hosting the Christian College Fair. There will probably most of the Christian colleges in the country will be here. So if your student is interested in attending a Christian school, that would be a good time to come, talk to the representatives, network. Typically the representatives who come to that fair are the ones who will be evaluating or at least doing the first read of your student's application. So it's a great time for your students to come, ask intelligent questions, and make that first connection with the representative.
What's really neat about that too is they used to write it down on in their notebooks, but now they all have iPads. And so after the fair, last year we were talking to them and they said, yeah, students that stand out to us, who come and shake our hands, make eye contact, bring good questions, we write their name down in our iPads, and so when it comes time for applications, we wait and look for their applications. And a lot of times when it's come down to, is the student gonna get in or not, that the people come back to reps and say, oh, we remembered that student. We wrote their name down, we put a little bio about them, a couple notes, and typically that's kind of what pushes them over to get in if it comes down to them and another student. So make sure that they come ready to talk and ask some questions. I always tell my students, write down some good questions beforehand, because when they get there, they're like, I don't have any questions, I forgot everything. So have them write them down, shake the person's hand, let them know who they are, first and last name. It makes a big difference, and we've seen it every single year with applications. So it's a good opportunity.
Yeah, and it's open to the community, so if you have friends with children from other schools, feel free to bring them. We would love to see you all there. In the spring, we also host what's called a RAC fair. So RAC is an organization that brings out-of-state college representatives to California. It's an association. And they come and set up a fair. So last year was our first year, and this year we're having them come back. So we had representatives from the University of New Mexico, University of Denver, so all of these schools from out of state, and they come. So instead of your student having to make the flight out there, they can make that connection with a representative. So that one happens in February, and we'll be sending out reminders as we get closer. Okay, if you came to back to school night, it's on your timeline, but we'll advertise it as we get a little bit closer. Okay, and what's going on right now is that there are college representatives visiting Linfield right now, almost every day. They come and they sit down in the counseling office, and students can sign up for those visits. We have reps from Duke coming and University of Redlands. So we have a lot of people who are coming, and they're here just to meet with our students. They sit at our round table. The rep has a little introduction of the college. Students ask questions. So it's a great opportunity. So we make announcements every day to let students know who's coming, but you can also find those rep visit dates on our website. If you go to linfield.com, go to high school, the high tab, go down to college counseling, and you'll see a tab that says college rep visits. So you'll see the calendar of rep visits. We don't encourage parents to come to those because we think it's a good opportunity for your students to make that connection. But it's a really neat way. Again, these are people who will most likely be reading your students' applications, and it's a good way, especially for the juniors who are still shopping for college, right? They're still looking, figuring out what they like. They may come and listen to a presentation and go, wow, this college sounds awesome, I would like to go visit. Or they may go, knowing the school, this type of school probably is not right for me. Then when we sit down with them and have a college conversation, they can intelligently and tell us, right? They'll be very informed and they can tell us exactly what they like or what they don't like. So please encourage your students to take advantage of these rep visits here on campus.
Interject right there. I used to be an admissions counselor for 2 different universities, and I'd go into the schools and do what you're talking about. And I'd go to the college fairs and meet everybody, and it does make a difference. So encourage your kids to go in there, shake their hand, make the eye contact, get themselves noticed, because we had note cards then, we didn't have iPads. It was before a child. But we would just write down, nice kid, and then just things I would remember, like wore a Texas A&M shirt and stood out, really likes football, likes this, like that. So that's their first contact, and they want it without the parents, because the kid's real, they're raw, that's them.
Yeah, it's really true. I had a student last year who it was her top school, a school in Texas, and we worked so hard on her application. Her GPA was a little bit lower than where they were at, but we pushed really hard. She got waitlisted at her school, and we sent in letters, okay, let's see what happens. They denied her. And I said, oh, no, you can't deny my student. This student has to be at this school. Like, she's made for this school. So I called the representative that came to Linfield, who was our territory, and I said, listen, you guys denied her. You have to change that. She's meant to be at that school. You're gonna remember who this student is. So I told her who it was. She goes, oh my gosh, you're right. I can't believe they denied her. Let me go back and see what I can do. She went back, and within a week, my student was accepted. So because my student made such an impact on that representative, she was so impressed with who that student was that ultimately, right, allowed her to change their decision, and she got accepted, and she's there now. So it makes a big difference. It really does.
Are there any college reps that come from Texas here?
Yeah, I think we'll have the Baylor rep, the TCU rep,
UT Austin,
UT Austin, yeah.
And when are they listed on the website?
They're listed on the website. If they're not on there yet, that means, so those 3 schools typically do come here. So if they're not on there yet, that means they haven't signed up yet. We're still very early in the season, which is why we like to talk about it now, so that you can get ready for these. So continue to check the posting, because it'll change, so more people will sign up.
Okay. Because my husband wants to take Tom in November to Texas.
So that would still be a great trip though, because then he gets to sit in a football game. That's what we went. Texas, fall, football
That's so
game,
fun.
nothing beats it. So if he's seriously considering Texas, that would be a great time to go visit. Yeah,
It's just a little cold.
he could do both.
Okay.
Just a local for me. I'm a Southern California gal. Okay, so I do actually have the dates of the RAC fair. So this is the Regional Admissions Counselors of California. These are the out-of-state counselors from out-of-state schools. They will be here on February 12th. And we do it at the end of school. I believe that's a Tuesday, so it starts at 2 or 2:30. Like I said, we'll announce it.
Do they have a website?
RAC? Yes. If you Google RAC, I think you have to Google, if you just Google RAC, something weird comes up. So just Google RAC colleges. That it'll be the first organization that.
And that one's really cool because we do it in the hallway. So it's more of like an intimate setting, and it was really neat last year just to be able to see the students come and talk with the reps. The gym's so big, so there's just so much going on, and we need the space for the Christian fair, but RAC's a little bit smaller, and so it's kind of a neat fair to check out.
Yeah. Okay, questions so far?
Yeah, that's kind of a crazy question. We went to a college fair up in Anaheim a year or so ago, just to get out and get a feel for it. And there were, I went to school back east, so I recognized a bunch of these small schools that were there. So I stopped by and talked with them too as well. And I kind of got the impression that they're kind of eager for California representation in their schools. Some of them are trying to grow from colleges to universities and all too as well. Do you see any advantage to focusing on small, say, liberal arts type colleges or whatnot in an area that is not close to California?
That's a great question. I think the type of the school to focus on really depends on your students. There are some students who will do really well at a small liberal arts school. There are some students who are looking for the big Texas football experience. It's not going to thrive in those schools. But in general, colleges from out of state love California students. We have one of the highest average standardized testing scores in the entire nation, right? So the other states that are higher than us are New York, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., Washington State is neck and neck with us, but we have one of the highest standardized testing scores. So colleges recognize that education in California is a little bit more rigorous than a lot of other states, so especially compared to states in the Midwest, for example. So yes, they love California students. California students love to stay in California. The weather, the beach, right? What's not to love, right? So so colleges are trying to increase their campus diversity, not only globally but within the U.S. So they want high quality out-of-state students, and they know if they get a Californian applicant, California students are typically much more academic than students from other states. So yes, California students are much more popular when it comes to out-of-state schools. Now, with the exception of super elite Ivy League schools, California students tend to be more affluent, therefore have more resources to apply to more colleges than high school students in other states. As a result, the Ivies and the sub-Ivy schools have a lot of Californian applicants. So in that case, being from California is not going to help increase their diversity. So with the exception of those schools, yes, but generally speaking, schools from out of state love California students. And we pay the out of state tuition, right? Okay, questions so far? Okay, let's talk about the meetings. We are working tirelessly with our seniors right now. If anybody in here have a senior? Do you have kids with a couple? Okay, so we're meeting with our seniors every day, twice a day sometimes now, just to get them to submit their college applications. This will be your students next year. So we do not begin formal junior meetings with your students until February, okay, or January. Typically, right after Winter Mountain is when we start meeting. That's not to say you can't reach out to us right now, right? Anytime you have a question, drop into the counseling office, send us an email, give us a call. Please use us. We're here to help. So even though we're not sitting down to meet with you and your students formally for that first meeting, please have your student drop by if they have any questions for us. We will begin meeting with your students individually in January. That first meeting is a parent conference, so we would love for you to be there. If you don't have to be there for all the meetings, but at least that first meeting, we think it's very crucial for you to be there for a couple of reasons. First, then you get to know us. But second, we want to make sure we're on the same page with you and your students when it comes to colleges, right? Sometimes we have students who come into our office without their parents, and they'll say, oh, I want to go far, really far. Boston, New York, New Jersey, Florida, doesn't matter, as far as possible. And then we meet, I never see the parent, and then I decide, you know what, this doesn't sound right, because I've been doing this for a while. So I call the parent, and I said, you know, I met with Johnny today, and he wants to go as far as possible. Is that where are you supportive of that? The mom goes, no, my husband is a retired injured veteran. We get free in-state tuition here in California. Johnny is not going anywhere but California. So we want to make sure that we are on the same page with you, right? I really believe that this college process is that we have the professional knowledge to help you and support you. Your students know what they want, what they don't want, but you're the ones who are going to be funding this whole experience. So we really believe that it's really important for us to sit down in that first parent conference. So we're all on the same page about how to proceed with this process. In January, you will be getting a email that sends you to a link that has all of our open appointment slots. So obviously the sooner you sign up, the sooner your slots will be. And and then we'll have our first meeting there, okay? It will be during school time, so your student will have to pick a class where they have to miss and leave, so they can pick an elective, or we have some spots after school during lunch. But we would love to meet with you and your students come January. And our goal, starting from January through May, so during those 4 months, we typically meet with your students 3, 4, sometimes 5 times. So at least once a month, at least, to help them craft a list of schools that really best fit their need. So what would be helpful is that prior to this initial meeting in January, you have already had the standardized testing conversation with your student. Either make them take the mock, or have taken the mock and started some sort of prep class for an SAT or ACT, or even better, have taken a formal SAT or ACT, an official test. It would be great for you to have started this college conversation. Where would you like to go, right? Do you want to go in-state? Or if you in your mind know that your student has to stay in California, then this would be a good time to break that to them, right? So it would be really helpful for you to have some of those conversations prior to our first meeting, so that at our first meeting we can start recommending some schools for your students to research and for you to visit in the spring. Does that sound like a plan?
Last year, the kids had to do the Naviance, the questionnaire.
Yes.
Do you want us to use Naviance as a selection and?
Yeah, so you can if you would like to. So we have access to those surveys. It's in their Naviance profile. So we typically, before we meet with them, go in there and just kind of get to know them a little bit. But yeah, so you can use Naviance and do your research. That's perfectly great. Most of the parents are like, I don't know what Naviance is. That's okay too. But we just encourage you to start the conversation. This is the time. The earlier you talk about this with them, the more excited and prepared they will be for our conversations in the spring. And I think just our experiences in working with teenagers, if college seems like this big, scary, unreachable expectation, then they want to put it off, right? That's what they want to do. If I don't think about it, it's not there. If I don't think about it, it's not there. So if you can bring it up casually and just, right, say, oh, I went to this meeting today, your counselor said this thing, these things, let's just talk about them casually. I think it really helps ease that anxiety and that pressure for them to think about applying to colleges.
I think too, the college trips, like even if they do the day trip, they are so much fun. We have a blast on those trips. They go with their friends. We have so much fun with the students, and we get to see them outside of the classroom or school, which helps us when we write their letters and recs. It's really fun. But seeing the campuses, it makes it feel real to them because we're on the campus. They're like, okay, our parents aren't here. We're their counselors. This is college. Oh my gosh, we're doing a tour. And even if it's not a school that they're interested in, maybe like they don't want to go to UCLA, maybe they don't care about APU. If they tell us and they see that school and they're like, you know, I liked the size of APU. I don't want to go to school there. I don't like it, or maybe I love it. Then it helps us build our list. So then I can say, okay, size-wise, you saw APU. What did you think about that school? Or maybe that was a religious school. What did you think about it? UCLA, it's huge. What did you think about it? I know that if you liked the size of that, you're going to be okay at U of W in Washington, right? So it's good for them to see the campuses, even if they're like, I would never go there. It's a good experience for them to be on a campus.
Okay. So that concludes our presentation. I would like to let you know that we do divide up our junior class, but we don't do it alphabetically. We're a little bit unconventional when it comes to dividing up our student load. So most schools will go A through M and to Z. The reason we don't do that is because we believe in the concept of fit, right? Finding a counselor or finding a college that really fits your students' goals and personalities. So we have actually gone with the input of Mrs. Valencia, who worked with your students last year, and their Naviance surveys, those that completed them. We sat down and divided up your students into Mrs. Aboli's load and my load. That's not to say that, so that's in our opinion, that's who we think would be the best fit for your student. But that's not to say you can't switch. You are not going to hurt our feelings if you switch. We've been doing this for a while. It is totally fine if you want to switch counselors. It is totally fine that your student's like, I don't want to be with Mrs. Chen. She's crazy and scary and boring. I want to be with Mrs. Avoli. That's typically what they say. So that's totally fine, right? So I'm like the serious, mean counselor who will, make you do planks in my room. And she's got party poppers and treats in there and stress balls, right? Like all of these fun things. So we do not take it personally. If you feel like, send us a quick email. You know what? We're assigned to Mrs. Shen, but we really want Mrs. Avoli. Not a problem. We just want you to know that we do not take it personally. There will be no awkwardness, repercussion, one less recommendation letter for me to write. So, okay? So I just want you to all know that. We think we kind of divided them into a pretty good balance, and but we have the list. So at the end of the presentation, if you would like to know which one of us is your student's counselor, you can reach out to either one of us and we'll let you know. Okay? Questions? Yes?
What about the kids that maybe don't want to go to school? How do you guys approach that conversation with them? Because I know if we talk to them, that's not super fun.
Yeah, totally.
So, like, just getting him to go to high school might be not super fun. So how do you guys approach
Those are
the
some of my
conversation
favorite
about
students.
that?
Yeah, we
Because
have.
all my
I do
kid wants
love
to do is
them.
play soccer, so
Yes.
that's why he goes to
awesome.
school, so.
Yeah.
We have a handful of students that are like that, and I think I have a good portion on my load. You have maybe one or two.
Yeah.
I love those types of students just because I feel like it's important to figure out what they're passionate about. This is such a process, and I love it because they start junior year, and it's like college is years away. It's not coming, right? And they get to this point right now in senior year, and they're like, oh my gosh, I just submitted my first application. This is happening, and it's such a process at home and here. So students who are like, don't know what I want to do, don't care.
Right.
I love working with those students just because I think it's important to figure out what they're passionate about. We push trade. I have a student who wants to do trade school. Awesome. That's great. That's so fantastic. We need people in trade. So anybody that is like, I don't want to do the traditional 4-year, that is okay. We work with students that want to do all different things. They want to do a gap year. Our focus is making sure that they understand the value of their choice. And then I try to push future career options as well.
Okay.
So they understand that they're gonna have a job or whatever it is. But we have students like that all the time, and sometimes it clicks. I have a student right now who I've met with since like 2 years back. Didn't care about college and want to know what they wanted to do. Came in 2 weeks ago. This is I know what I want to do with my life. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm so excited.
She's so excited. She's
Yeah.
thrilled.
So sometimes it just takes time, and it's a process of saying, these are some options that might be good fits for you. Let's figure out what you love, because it's hard. They're big decisions.
Okay.
So-
So if it's better coming from you, that's great. So when Henry comes to see you, we're not gonna talk.
Okay. That's totally fair.
Yeah, and every student has a different timeline, right? Some of you, I know, have students who have probably already taken the SATs, right, or ACTs. So every student, some of you have students who already know what they want to do when they're 65. So like every student is just different, and that's what makes this process so exciting. And we really err on the side of not pressuring our students and making them feel like, yes, at this moment I have to figure out what I want to do, because that is not true. I was an English major. That's what you major in when you don't know what you want to do, right? And then I was a journalist, and then I lived in New York City, and now I'm a college counselor in Temecula, right? Like, so we all know that life changes, and people reach those decisions at different stages, and so we totally support that. And with those students, we take baby steps, right? Today, let's just talk about this one thing and one thing only, and then we see where that leads. Any other questions?
Do you have the shadowing thing anymore going on?
So last year we tried to get parent volunteers to allow students to shadow them on jobs. We didn't get a lot of parents who were willing to do that. So as a result, we were not able to start a job shadow program like we had wanted. So it still is one of my goals as the director of a counseling program. And but I know that especially in engineering and the sciences, Mr. Elwer and Mr. Mitchell have internship and job shadow opportunities available.
And who's Mr. Mitchell?
Oh, he's the biomed person.
TJ.
Yeah. TJ.
Okay.
We call him TJ.
Yeah.
Questions? Thank you so much for coming. This is the best junior parent night turnout that we have ever had. So as college counselors, we are thrilled to have you.
Biggest junior class.
That's true.